All these Bible critics, they all think they're coming up with something that no one ever has thought of before, and some, discrepancy in the Bible. There's nobody more critical of the Bible than the rabbis, than Chazal, the ancient sages. The Talmud takes the Bible to shreds. Every single line in the Torah is examined against every other line to find any discrepancy whatsoever. And this is one of the big ones that they found. Because if you look very closely between verse 11 and verse 12, they're not the same thing. In other words, what God said he wanted in verse 11, I put it in the text there. What he said he wanted in verse 11, he didn't get in verse 12. And this creates a big problem. What didn't he get? If you look very, very, very closely, you'll see God said he wanted 8 fruit trees, 8 pri. The word tree means, the word in Hebrew for tree is 8 pri. Pri is fruit. The fruit tree, osei pri, making fruit. But what did he get? Verse 12, 8, a tree, osei pri, that makes fruit. Now this is just one word difference. Now here's we're going to digress a little bit. Here's a very important principle when we're studying Torah. If you don't get this, you'll miss the whole way you learn Torah. It's very, 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 very fundamental. That when we study mathematics, when we study English, let's say, you can't be exact in the words. You can't ask, what's the extra B doing there? So Shakespeare could have written to be or not to. That is the question. That second B is superfluous. It's just poetic. It gives linguistic style to the literature. It has no meaning. It doesn't change the value of the sentence whatsoever. I always like to joke, Shakespeare wrote to be or not to, but his wife heard the sentence and said, no, it's missing something. You need to round it off. To be or not to be, that's the question. And Shakespeare said, no, come on, that's ridiculous. It doesn't change anything. It's added an extra word. It's just completely superfluous. He says, I know, but it's gonna be famous. Trust me on this one. When it comes to the literature, you can't ask those kind of questions. What's the extra B for? In science, you can, and you have to. Each letter, H2O means water. You can't, if you're trying to make a verse out of it, you're trying to make a music out of it, you need it to say H2O2 to make it rhyme. You can't. It's something, I believe it's hydrogen peroxide. It's a completely different thing. You wouldn't want to drink that stuff. H2O, each letter and each number means something. In the same way as accounting, your tax returns, each number means something. And if it doesn't mean what it's supposed to mean, you could get into a lot of trouble. So that's what math and science is like. The Bible, the Torah, is like that, if not it really more so. That each letter and number, each letter in the Torah means something. There's no superfluity. So it has that kind of exactitude. So if there's another word that doesn't need to be there, this is a big problem. It's coming to tell you something that you couldn't possibly know. What is it there for? In the same way, what's that 2 doing on the H2O? Why can't you say HO? Ho. Ho ho. Right? So what's that 2 doing there? What's the extra 2? H2O2. Right? So it's coming to tell you something that you need it there. So too, when the Torah says, eitz pri, a fruit tree that made fruit, is different than a tree that makes fruit. Because we have oak trees, we have maple trees, we have I don't know what other kind of trees are there. Cypress trees. Those are not fruit trees. They don't bear fruit. And then we have apple trees and orange trees, and those are called fruit trees. But that's a big mistake because they're not fruit trees. They're trees that make fruit. So the Talmud comes along and says, well, what's the difference? What does the extra 2 give you that you didn't have then you wouldn't have that. What is a fruit tree that makes fruit different than a tree that makes fruit? And the Talmud comes along and explains that the bark of the tree would taste like the fruit. This is very similar to cinnamon. This is why cinnamon, excuse my English, there my slipping the tongue. Cinnamon is an elevated plant tree item in the temple. It's used in the services of the temple because it's very similar to what God wanted. It got very close because it's the bark of the tree that has the flavor. The fruit itself is pretty much, I believe it's inedible. It does give a fruit, but you can't eat the fruit. It's the bark, and you can't eat the bark either, but it has a flavor to it. That's what God wanted. He didn't get that, which opens up a whole nother Pandora's box. And that's very interesting, very important point as well. When people read Torah, they change what they read because of how they think. This is not uncommon. We all do that in our lives. We see the world the way we think the world should be. And by that means, we miss all kinds of opportunities. I use a great example. Steve Jobs did not invent computers. Computers were around when he was there. He experienced computers. He just saw something that no one else could see. Imagine if he had never seen it. I'm not sure we would have been worse off, but it would have been definitely different. It would have been less interesting, maybe. But he saw something that no one else did. The ability to see something that no one else sees is a tremendous asset in existence. Whether it's in your personal life, you have children, you're married, friendships, in your business life, you have to see things that other people can't see. And most people can't do it because there's no training for it. We send people to school just to listen and hear and repeat back other people's ideas. We don't teach them how to see things that no one else sees. How do you get to think like Edison or Steve Jobs or Warren Buffett? Why can't we teach people how to do that? And the simple answer is we could. This is it. Take a Torah and show them how to do it. Okay? So you're reading it and you go, you see the difference. Now our mind typically runs over the verse and misses the whole fruit trees making fruit. Why? Because that implies that there's a mistake. God didn't get what he wanted. He asked for fruit trees that make fruit, and he got trees that made fruit. Right? And he didn't get what he wanted. And that's very unsettling. And it leads us to conclusions we're not going to feel comfortable with, that God didn't get what he wanted. How do you square that circle? That's going to be a tough one to figure out. But this is why this class is called Edge of Your Seat. I hope you're on the edge of your seat now. How do you explain this little puzzle? This little puzzle. So, as I said, what did God want? He wanted the bark of the tree. Let's go down and try and pull this all together. Right? Why was this so significant? So when you think about this, what is the definition of a perfect world? When we think about perfect world, you ask anyone, any walk of life, anywhere in the world, what would you think is a perfect world? And they will say things like, peace to mankind, everyone gets along, we all vote whatever party they're into, we're not going to go down that line. Your mother-in-law moves to another continent. What would be a perfect world? No disease, war. We're all billionaires, we all have a yacht, so you can go on and on and on about all the different things. I don't think anybody would say that the difference between a perfect world and an imperfect world is the bark of a tree. That's what we're struggling with. If we could get the bark of the tree to taste like the fruit, That's it. There we made it in life. That's what it's all about. Clearly, that's what the Almighty is telling us. That's what this pasuk is telling us. That a perfect world would be a world in which the bark of the tree tasted like the... That's the world God wanted. If God wants this world, in the same way, if you follow Warren Buffett around and you see him buy, there's a, I don't know if they still do it, but it used to be a charity and they would raffle off Warren Buffett's jacket. He used to go for a lot of money. Obviously, it wasn't the jacket, because in the pocket of the jacket was a stock tip, right, that he slipped in his pocket. And it's kind of a funny thing, you're sort of buying his jacket with the stock tip in it because he accidentally left it there. That's the idea behind it. But nevertheless, right, so he says, I buy this stock, and I'm looking, I don't know, it doesn't seem any worth anything to me. But if Warren Buffett said, that's the stock, who am I to tell, who am I to say he doesn't know what he's talking about? I know Warren Buffett makes mistakes now and again, but nevertheless, you're better off going with his mistakes than my mistakes when it comes to the stock market. So when we're following God around, what I think is a perfect world is not what he thinks is a perfect world. What he thinks is a perfect world is the bark of the tree should taste like the fruit. I have a little problem with that, but nevertheless, that's what he thinks is a perfect world. How do we understand that? So it's quite easy when you think about it. Imagine for a minute you go down to Detroit. You go down to Detroit and you see a factory, and every minute another car pops out. I hope anyway. Another car pops out. What kind of factory would we call that? So if you said a car factory, you'd be making a big mistake. It's not a car factory. It's a factory that makes cars. And that's very different. You see, the ends do not define the means. Now that's different than another concept that you might have heard of called the ends justify the means. That's a very different kind of concept. The ends justify the means. That's a whole morality play. We're not going down that road. This is the ends define the means. In other words, it's only a car factory because it produces cars. So it's not a car factory, it's a factory that produces cars. We define the factory, we define the thing by what it produces. In other words, it's not an apple tree, it's a tree that makes apples. If it was an apple tree, it would, by its essence, its definition, by what it is, taste like the apple. Thus, the bark would taste like the apple, but it's not. We only know it's an apple tree because apples come out of it. And that makes a very big difference in our whole existence. And to understand this, imagine for a minute we became farmers. We're all farmers. Some of you might be farmers. And we decided to go into the apple farming business. We don't think about apple farming, so read all about it. Spent 3 years going to agricultural school. Then we researched the best apples in the world, and we find this little orchard in Italy that is primed to be the blockbuster apple, top apple of the world. Everyone's going to want these kind of apples. It's where the market's heading. The logistics all point this way. The statistics all point this way. We go over there to Italy. We buy a box of apples. Costs us a fortune. We go to buy a field in the perfect region. We cut up the apples, plant the seeds, water them, blah, 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 blah. Wait until it takes about 7 years till you get a great orchard, right? And we taste the first apple and realize that the box that we bought from the farmer in Italy was a mistake. Whether we meant it or not, I don't know. But nevertheless, we got ripped off, and they're cooking apples, and they're not the edible apples, and it's a complete waste of time. 10 years down the tubes, no one looks at that and goes, "Well, that was a good idea, wasn't it?" right? We all look at that and go, it's a complete waste of time. Maybe in the experience we can draw out something, maybe. But nevertheless, that's how we look at it. Alternatively, it's the best-selling apple in the world. We sell the farm it goes public, and we sell, and we go listed on the apple orchard on the New York Stock Exchange, and we make $1 billion. Everyone says a genius. In other words, the world we live in is a world where the ends define the means. The ends define the means. Meaning, how it turns out, the apples, defines whether it was worth it or not. And God didn't want that world for us. He wanted a world in which we can taste the end as we're going along. We can see whether this business or this relationship or this house or anything we're engaged in is going to work out in the end. Because that's the world that human beings are built for. Psychiatrists say this line, which is complete nonsense. Smell the roses along the way. I shouldn't say psychiatrists, I should say pop psychiatrists. Now, you hear this line all the time. Smell the roses along the way. Enjoy the process. And there's no such thing. You cannot enjoy the process. You pull up a building, you buy land, you develop it, you pull up a great building, spend $100 million, and the market crashes, COVID hits, all kinds of businesses. They did all their due diligence and everything. And the day the business opened, COVID hits, that's it, they went bust. There's lots of bad, terrible examples like that. The ends define the means. And we can't live in a world like that. Why? Because it's frustrating. The pressure, the tension, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Right? The trouble is that if we don't have the experience of going through it, we don't enjoy the end. So you see these people who make Brandon, welcome, great to see you online anyway. Fantastic. So we all have this need to have success, but you can't have success without going through this tremendously difficult process of, is it going to work? Isn't it going to work? And the answer is, the insight is, which is incredibly important, you cannot know the end before the end. It's not possible. Everyone second guesses the armchair quarterback, the armchair football player. Monday morning. I forget what it's called. I'm not from America, but everyone's an armchair general. Right? It should have gone here. Like you're watching a football game. It's very easy to see how he should have moved. But when you're in the play, you cannot figure out the absolute right move. You can make your best judgment, obviously. But it isn't given to us to know whether this is going to work or not. It's just not knowable. You can speak to all the experts you want, and 1,000 of them can say to you, this is the right way. Monday morning quarterback. Thank you very much, Justin. Oh, I turned off my WhatsApp. Let me just, so I can't get any messages here. Okay, let me just put that on. Yes, Monday morning. Thank you very much. Monday morning quarterback, right? So we can't see, the fact that it didn't work out is not a product of us not thinking it through enough. It might be, but you can think it through to the nth degree. You can speak to every expert in the world, whether to have the surgery, whether to buy the building, whether to put your stock in this, whether to buy that, or whatever you want to do, every decision under the sun. And you'll never be 100% correct. There's always that tension. Why is that tension? Now we get to the answer. So why couldn't God make a world? Because the answer is obvious. Because we would have no sense of success. We would have no sense of accomplishment. In other words, if your father's Warren Buffett, if he's listening, please say hi for me. If your father's Warren Buffett, and you invest in a company, or you start a business, or whatever it happens to be, and every time you lose, or Warren Buffett, pays off all the people on the other side. So it always succeeds. There's no sense of accomplishment. The only sense of accomplishment you can have is if you don't know. It's the lack of knowledge that gives us the sense that there was meaningful and a great experience, whether it's skiing, whether it's a profession, being a doctor, a lawyer, whether it's becoming a rabbi. You go become a rabbi, and some sure they drive you nuts for 25 years. It's like, I should have picked a different community. No, you can't figure, yes, you should have picked a different, but you can't figure that out. You cannot know how things are going to work. That's not given to us. The world God wanted for us, He cannot give to us, because otherwise we wouldn't be human. There'd be nothing here. We would have no sense of accomplishment. And therefore, the trees cannot taste like the bark cannot taste like the tree, cannot taste like the fruit. We cannot know ahead of time how things, it's just not knowable. And people who do this and criticize leaders, you can criticize leaders for other reasons, but criticize leaders because this is, so to speak, a bad decision. And it may be a bad decision for different reasons, but not because of how it turned out. That is not a sole indicator of that you made a bad decision. You could make a perfectly fine decision, a good decision, a right decision, the decision you should have made, and it still not work out. There were people, who moved to Germany in 1939. They thought they were making a great decision. There are all kinds of things, all kinds of plays that people make. You cannot know ahead of time. Now, all of that's wonderful, except for a little caveat to that whole idea. And that's why people have tremendous tension. The nerves are still people have to have. And you see this all the time because people have successes in their lives and then they want to hold on to it and they don't want to risk. And so you have this balance. Do you risk and try again and go into the game, and which is exciting and fun and meaningful and fulfilling, or do you hold on to everything you got and don't make any decisions anymore? And if you hold on and you don't make any decisions anymore, you basically start rotting. That doesn't mean, take all your money and go out to Las Vegas and bet everything. You got to make sound, good decisions, but you got to understand this is the name of the game. So there's one caveat to everything we just said, because there's one tree that rebelled. There's one tree that did what the Almighty wanted, and its bark tastes like the fruit. The Torah calls it, it's the esrog tree. On Sukkot, we bring these 4 species: the palm, the aravus, the weeping willow, the hadas. I don't know what that is in English. Hadas. I don't know what you have to look it up. The hadas. But someone will tell me on the line. The hadas. The name escapes me. And the esrog. The esrog tree. These 4 species we bring on Sukkot, because Sukkot is the happiness there's the holiday of happiness, and you need this fruit that the bark tastes like to be happy. What's the bark? What tree is this? The esrog. But the Torah doesn't call it the esrog, but the other 3 names them. But by the esrog, we don't know its name from the Torah. The Torah gives us adjectives. It's the adjective of the fruit. It describes it. It says, bring the fruit, eitz pri hadar, bring the fruit of a beautiful tree. Bring the fruit of a beautiful tree. I say, what do you mean a beautiful tree? An orange is a beautiful tree. An apple's a beautiful tree. We're going to denigrate God's handiwork? They're all beautiful trees. What's so beautiful about this tree? This is the tree that the bark tasted like the fruit. Now, what does that mean? So you see, each of the 4 species that we bring on Sukkot have a different meaning. And they all have a combination of taste and smell. Taste and smell. So, for instance, the aravus, the willow, the weeping willow. It's not a weeping willow. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not a weeping willow. I forget what it's also called in English. Aravus. It's a plant that grows near the water and has no taste and no smell. And taste represents wisdom or Torah. In Hebrew, the word tam, which means wisdom, it also means the same word as taste. There's no taste and it has no smell. And smell represents good deeds. And you have the same expression in English. Something doesn't smell right, it means someone's doing something they shouldn't be doing. So there's taste and smell. The aravos has neither. Two of the others, the palm tree, which represents the date, has taste but no smell. And the hadas has smell but no taste. But the esrog has both. The esrog has both. It has taste and smell. And these two things represent two aspects of our lives. When it comes to these two things, oh, here you go. Justin is is giving us the answer. Thank you, Justin. Okay, this is Lula palm branch. Hadas myrtle. That's what it's called. Myrtle. The willow. The arava is the willow. It's not the weeping willow. It's just the willow. And the esrog is the citron. Thank you very much. Okay, someone's listening. So when it comes to the esrog, the citron, it comes to the esrog, it has taste and smell. In those two areas, the bark tastes like the fruit. The bark tastes like the fruits. What does that mean? So you see, when it comes to learning a computer program, I remember the good old days, the early days of the computers, and everyone was coming out. There were lots of different computer Compaq, if you remember some of these names. 3M came out with their own computer, and people would buy the computer, and each one had its own software. There wasn't DOS, there wasn't Windows. Each computer had its own unique software, and no software would work on any other computer. So I know people would buy a computer, learn the software, and then the company would go broke. And all that information was a complete waste of time. You didn't need it. You couldn't apply it anywhere else. Gone. Right? When it comes to learning other things, it can be like that. You could spend your 20 years learning about biology and become an accountant. There are many accountants that became artists. All those numbers that they had to learn added to nothing. Very, very little. It did not produce any fruit. But when it comes to Torah, like this lesson, like this class, even if you cannot apply it, you have no practical application for it, it is meaningful along the way. The process is also meaningful. And the same thing is true in mitzvahs. I've had the intense misfortune of having to, being at the funeral of people who had to bury their children. But I never heard anyone ever say, I never heard a parent ever say, I wish I'd never had kids. When it comes to that experience, when it comes to things that are good deeds, mitzvahs, when it comes to those, even if it doesn't work out the way you would like it to work out, the process was meaningful too. When it comes to mitzvahs, when it comes to business, and people lose all their money, they go, I wish I'd never wish I'd never met Bernie Madoff. That's true. That is absolutely true. When it comes to everything else, the process is not meaningful. It's only the end. When it comes to Torah and mitzvahs, the means is meaningful like the ends. And therefore, if you want to be happy, you have to have in your life many mitzvahs that you're engaged in and a lot of Torah that you're learning. Because that is the process by which you're going to enjoy the process along the way. You're going to enjoy life along the way. Thank you, everybody.